That was your fastest lap of the session. You got about 5 laps of fuel left. That was your fastest lap of the session.
Finally, week 13 of our GT4 series for the season. So we're going to be at Spa this week. If you've driven this track before, prior to the rescan, there's definitely some things to go over. Ultimately, we're going to go over a lot of stuff that we've talked about in the last several weeks with downshift timing to help with rotation, maximizing track limits, and etc. So with that being said, we're going to jump right into our reference lap with a 227.5. So coming up to turn 1, we're going to be looking for our 100 board here on the left-hand side. This is just a reference, so you might brake a little bit sooner, you might brake a little bit later. I'm braking right before the 100 board, and in the fixed setup, I'm only in 4th gear here. If you're running a lower wing, you might be able to get up to 5th. It's right at the edge of needing that upshift. But with that being said, we're going to be in 4th gear, downshifting to 2nd. Now, the apex here is a little bit different from the prior scan. So there's a little bit of a bump here. The old scan, you still wanted to get the car rotated pretty early. Make sure that you're getting on throttle before apex, just ever so slightly, which is going to give you the best run down the straight coming up to Eau Rouge. So we're going to get early rotation, get the car settled through the bump, and then maximize our throttle application. We can track out pretty far here. So my left side tires are just about going into the gravel. In other words, you can get right on top of the red curbing to the side of our rumble strips. Now if we get into the gravel, not only will it give you an off track, but even more hurtful is the speed that you're going to screw up getting into this. We definitely want to avoid this at all costs. If you're slowing the car down at all into the gravel, cars behind are definitely going to be able to catch you coming up to Eau Rouge. So be mindful of that. It's better to be prepared coming into turn 1 and not track out as far wide. Maybe you touch the rumbles but not get on top of them, than to risk getting into that gravel. So Now, of course, we're going to be flat out through this next section. Now, coming up to Eau Rouge, there's not quite a turn-in reference here. We definitely want to hug against the side of the wall. As we're approaching this, we want to put our left side tires here on the curbing, and we want the car to be in a straight line with our white line here. Now, as soon as we come off of the rumble strips, that's going to be our indication to start turning in. Now, in the fixed setups especially, you should be able to be flat out through here if we get the line on entry set up correctly. So after we come off that rumble strips, we're going to turn pretty aggressively into this. We want to keep our right side tires all the way up against the curbing until we're about to crest the hill. So then we can come off of our right side curbing. We can abuse quite a bit of our apex curbing for, I'm going to butcher this, but Rodillion. Now on our track out, I'm sure everybody's pretty familiar with Spa, but we definitely want to make sure that the car is settled. So if the car is feeling maybe a little loose after cresting the hill, I highly recommend to just straighten the car up, have a straight steering wheel coming over the hill, and taking the off track over here on the right hand side. If you're getting tank slappers and trying to save it, I can fairly guarantee that the car is going to spin, and if it doesn't and you are able to catch it, cars behind are going to have way more closing speed coming over the hill, and there's a pretty good chance of them running into you as well. So carrying momentum over the hill and through this section is probably more important than the off tracks themselves. So just something to keep in mind. Now we can hear in the RPM range, I'm staying pretty much pinned up against the rev limiter. Now I'm not quite there because this is still coming uphill, getting onto the Kemmel straight. Now the reason for that, there's a little bit of a crest here. So right after we get onto the actual straight portion, so about this line coming across the track is where it starts to flatten out. We want to stay in 5th gear here until we get to this section, just to help continue pushing momentum into the car. If you shift into 6th too early, for example, somewhere in this area, you're actually going to lose straight line speed. That 6th gear doesn't carry or doesn't produce enough torque to your wheels to continue pushing the car through the air or up the hill. So stay in 5th gear for as long as possible, ideally right before you hit rev limiter coming onto the straight. Now coming into our next section here, once again we're going to use the 100 board as a reference. So I start to get on the brakes just right before it. We want to get the left side of the car right onto the rumble strips here, which is just going to help open up the corner. Now we're going to downshift pretty aggressively from 6th into 3rd gear. And we want to make sure that we're turning in fairly early. So I know that seems maybe counterintuitive instead of opening up the corner, but we can slide the front end of the car a little bit. What I found is if I'm coming off of the rumble strips later, then the car wants to understeer a good amount. You wind up about in the middle of the track instead of being able to apex this section. Now the other thing to note, if we can get on top of this curbing, like so, because of the 3D model, the edge of this curbing can help hook the tire into place, so you can carry just a little bit more speed, and it'll kind of hook you around the corner. Now for this next left-hander, we want to try to keep this as open as possible. So if you're coming off before the end of our rumble strips here on our right-hand side through our first right-hander here, that's probably going to be a little too early. We want to stay just towards the end of this. I probably could have stayed to the right-hand side even a little bit later to try and help open up this corner. Again, with the rescan and the 3D curbings, we can get our left side tires to hook into our curbing here. Now, no brakes, but we do have a pretty decent lift off the throttle, and this is just to help weight up the front. You're gonna, as you lift, all that weight's gonna push towards the front of the car, help grip up those front tires. Now we want to be patient on throttle. If we're getting all the way out to the right-hand side on track out, that's going to compromise your entry into our next right-hander. So stay about mid-track. Make sure that we're getting all the way to the left-hand side to help open up this next one. This is going to be another partial lift as well as a downshift. We can get right on top of the curbing here. It does get fairly aggressive coming off. You'll see the car hop a little bit. And on track out, normally, once again, the prior scan, there was curbing that we can abuse here on the left-hand side for track out. Of course, it's no longer there, and just like turn one, we want to stay out of the gravel. So what we can do here is if we're carrying too much speed through the corner, we can upshift early into fourth gear. That's going to help settle the car down, keep us flat out at 100% throttle without going too far to the left. Now coming up to Rivage, the very beginning of our rumble strips here is generally my braking reference. As always, might be a little bit before, might be a little bit after, something that everybody will need to kind of play around with, see what works and feels best for them. Now my approach here is to make Rivage into a double apex corner. Reason being, that will push our braking zone farther forward ever so slightly. So if we weren't to do a double apex, we wouldn't be going as far into the corner on the brakes before starting our rotation. So that means you would have to brake a little bit sooner. Now we still are carrying some trail braking pressure into here, and then using that second gear downshift at turn in to help with rotation. And we can see that second apex that I grab on exit. Now some other approaches you might see in the races, or you might try yourself, is to take just a normal line, keep it wide on entry, and then sweep in and get a late apex. The third option, which is generally the most used one, is to come into the corner, get the car slowed down, and then keep it tight up against the curving all the way through the corner. The only downside there is you do have to slow the car down more in order to keep it tight. And then you're also not getting the car as pointed to the right on exit, so you can't get on throttle as early. Just a couple things to keep in mind. Once again, give them a try, see what feels and works best for you. What you can do most consistently is what is going to be your best option. Now coming up to no name, I don't like to use this right-hand side curbing too much to open up the corner. It's a little bit aggressive as you come off of it at turn-in. It feels like the car is very unstable coming off that curb, so I don't like to use it too much, but you can play around with it. We're going to use quite a bit of trail braking pressure, but we're also going to use moderate brake pressure coming into the braking zone itself. So our peak pressure was close to about 40%. We're going to trail brake all the way in, and then as we're coming up to the curbing, we can get on full throttle. Now I missed a little bit of the apex here. You can drive your left side tires right up against this red curb. You can ever so slightly kiss it. If you drive on top of it, that could unsettle the car as well. And on track out, continuing with the theme, we have gravel on the exit. This is not something that we want to drive into. So this, where I drove here, is about the limit that you want to mess with. Now coming into Puhan, there's not a great braking reference here as well. I generally am using some amount of distance to this gate here. So if we back it up, so I'm braking about a car to a car length before this gate would be side to side with the car. Play around with it, see how far you can go into the braking zone. What we don't want to do is use too much brake pressure coming into here. So I'm using about a peak pressure of 50%, and then I trail that brake pressure off very gently. This is a pretty high speed corner, so it's really important to not have too aggressive of pedal inputs. All that's going to do is shock the tires as you rapidly move weight to a different section of the car. And once those tires get shocked, you're looking at very potentially understeer on exit. Depending on the car, you might also be looking at some oversteer situations. So very gentle, very precise inputs are going to be really valuable through here. We're going to build throttle very patiently, get our right side tires all the way to track out on the right hand side, and then make sure that the car is going to turn left and get our left side tires to apex again. If you're driving middle of the track, you are more than likely going to go too far out on track out, which is not only going to give you a 1x, if you go too far, there's a pretty good chance for a slowdown. So be mindful of that. Coming into 12 and 13, we're going to use our left side curbing to open up the entry. I'm braking just before our billboard going over the track. So we're going to downshift into fourth. Now what's important here is to use our downshifts, as I've always talked about, to help with rotation. Now to touch further on that, so our first fourth gear downshift is going to help slow the car. And then as we lose energy and the car is turning ever so slightly less, you can feel it in your force feedback very subtly. But as the car starts to lose that turning energy, we can use that third gear downshift to put that energy back into the car, weight that front end back up, and that's going to help us make this corner and carry a good chunk of speed. We almost want to get a late apex here, so you'll notice I don't get on top of the curbing until after what would be the traditional apex, this green curbing to the right. So I get on the curbing a little bit later, I stay to the right, and this is going to help open up our next corner. We can get on throttle pretty early here. Now again, continuing the rescan theme, we have gravel out here to the right hand side that we do not want to touch. It's very easy to get an off track here if we're getting on throttle too early on exit. Now coming up to our next right-hander, the beginning of our curbing is going to be my reference, so I'm braking just before it. Again, we're going to use about medium brake pressure here. We want to carry as much speed through here as possible. And then we're going to use that third gear downshift, helping rotating the car to a little bit of a late apex. We want to stay in third gear here. If you're downshifting into second, you're not carrying enough speed through this corner. So there's something going on entry, or you're not trail braking into the corner to help keep the car turning. But third gear is 100% the way. We're going to track out. You can dip left side tires into the gravel ever so slightly here without it slowing the car down too much. As you can see, that is the limit though. We're going to turn the car in right before the end of the rumble strips end. Right side tires can get all the way up against the right side curbing of your apex. And once again with the rescan, we have our gravel on the left hand side. Now if you're carrying enough speed through this corner, you can get your car to go far enough over there. On this lap, I didn't flirt with that too much. Now coming up to Blanchimont, I'm staying in fifth gear through this corner. I'm going to use a very gentle lift to help get the car turned in. As soon as I touch apex, I'm getting back to 100% throttle. I don't like using sixth gear here for the same reason as our Chemo Straight example. So if we're downshifting into sixth, you wind up losing a little bit of your oomph coming down the straight here. Staying into fifth gear, making sure that our left side tires are not getting anywhere close to our green patch, because that will produce an off track. We're going to downshift into sixth, somewhere in between our track out point and our billboard. You should be able to hear it fairly easily in your RPM range. Definitely upshift to sixth gear before you hit rev limiter. And then coming into our chicane, I'm braking right after that white line, about a car's length, so we can use that white line as our braking reference. Going to be a little bit difficult to see here. There's not a whole lot of other visuals we can use to our right or to our left, so it might be a little bit of a cadence or a timing thing. Once again, we can use this white line to dictate when we start our brakes, our braking zone. This is going to be a downshift into second gear. And what I found is the curving on the left-hand side is definitely very abrasive. It's going to shake and vibrate your steering wheel quite a bit. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it was fairly inconsistent for me. I couldn't produce the same chicane lap after lap if I abused this left-hand side curving a little too much. Now with chicanes, we always want to get a late apex for our first section or our first part of our chicane. This is going to keep us tight to the right-hand side, and that's going to help open up our next entry. We always want to prioritize the second part of the chicane, which will help us produce the best straight line speed down the straights. So be patient with the throttle. We want to make sure that the car gets rotated and is planted very nicely. And on exit, we can put our left side tires onto the red and yellow curving. Anything farther to the right-hand side is going to produce an off-track once again. And that's going to be our lap guide around Spa for week 13. So this has been a little bit of a longer season. Next week we move into the funsies doesn't matter races. So hopefully everybody enjoys this last week of officials before we move into the next season. As always, if anybody has any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. We will be starting our Season 3 GT4 Chasing the Delta League at the beginning of January. So we're going to take a little bit of a break for December, somewhat because of the holidays, somewhat so we can organize and put together a nice league starting for Season 3. Best of luck in officials, and we'll see you guys soon.